Carrie Pennell, the Assistant Director of Corporate and Community Service. There are no other apologies. Notification of requests from members of the public to address the meeting. We've got one from Mr. Christopher Duff on item 7. Is Mr. Duff here? Okay, thank you. I'll call you forward in a little while, sir. So minutes of the meeting held in public on 8th of October 2019. Cabinet, are we happy to agree those?
Yes.
Okay, declarations of interest by councillors, if there are any. Cabinet, are there any declarations over and above what's already recorded?
No.
Thank you. Item 5, announcements. I haven't got any announcements today. So we'll move straight on to item 6, the scrutiny of Northamptonshire Adult Social Services budget position and the future target operating model. So, Councillor Scrimshaw, would you like to come up and present the paper? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This report covers two aspects of adult social care looked at recently by scrutiny. Firstly, the in-year budget position, which we concluded was generally performing well. And even though there are some individual service pressures, the mitigations taken elsewhere within the service gives us confidence that the budget as a whole will come in on target, if not even better. We heard that NCC is still a relatively low-paying authority compared to other councils for its payments for older people's care costs, and that does present risks in our partnership working, and we therefore highlight the need for the 2021 budget to be realistic in its provision for future demands, and that will obviously become a focus of further work for the committee over the next month or two as we begin to investigate the details of next year's draft budget. But we did and do recognise an improvement in the in-year position compared with previous years, although again urge the need for vigilance as we enter the unpredictable winter period, which could add unforeseen pressures. With regards to the future adult care target operating model, and in particular the use of outside consultants, the committee were perhaps disappointed that the council does not have the necessary skills in-house, but do recognise that results count. We note that similar working elsewhere seem to have brought good results, but are suggesting that case studies of this work are carefully looked at. We understand payment will be only by result, and that proposal is entirely built, the proposal entirely is built around that maxim, but would still like to emphasise our view that if public money is used in this way, there needs to be a clear value for money shown, and so much of the service's future budget will rely on these savings being achieved. Further work by both Cabinet and scrutiny would be advisable to assure all of us that the savings are actually delivered. Otherwise, there could be future budgetary problems ahead. Hence our suggestion to look at case studies. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Morris, did you want to offer a response?
No, well, nothing really to add to that, except to say it was a very good session with the scrutiny group, and I think and I agree with their recommendations, which are in the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any further comments, Cabinet? I'm happy with the report, and it should be useful for us, and agree with the recommendations. There's nothing we don't disagree with there. So thank you, scrutiny, for the report. Cabinet, do we agree with the report?
Agreed.
Thank you. So item 7, before we go on to Councillor Longley, I'll ask Mr. Sorry, I've lost the name. The gentleman from Age UK, if he'd like to come forward. Thank you. Thanks, sir. So you have 3 minutes, and if you could keep your comments pertinent to the budget item. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. In relation to initially the demographics, but I wanted to make the point about the social wellbeing contract, in the sense that... Can
I just say the social wellbeing contract isn't a part of the budget, sir?
The point I hope to make, Chair, was that that contract and the work that we do as a voluntary sector provides a huge amount of trusted partnership for you and the Council in delivering your outcomes, both on health and on social care. And if that contract is in fact terminated or in fact reduced substantially, then that will have a big impact on your ability and the Council's ability and our ability as the voluntary sector to support older people in the county. So I wanted to have the opportunity to raise that today, to say to you that the voluntary sector is often not always appreciated for what we can bring, but we bring that unique ability to act between the statutory sector and the...
Sorry, what relevance has this got to today's meeting at all?
Yeah, well, I think that issue has been raised with the gentleman before the meeting, and whilst we hear what you're saying, sir, what your address should be relevant to the budget item, and that isn't a part of this year's budget.
Right.
What I'd like to say is that certainly the voluntary sector is certainly valued by this council, and perhaps I could ask Anna, the Director of Adult Social Services at the county, to just give us a quick response to the points the gentleman's made, if that's okay, with relation to where we are with the contract.
Sorry, Chair. Could I intervene? Sorry, Chair, just on a point of order. The Chair is quite correct in that doesn't form part of our budget process, so therefore it's not something that would normally be discussed at a Cabinet meeting when it's not forming part of the papers. Work is ongoing, so I wouldn't wish to ask my team to comment on ongoing work on that. We're not at a final position. We're not in a position to give you an update at this point in time. I know we have responded to some of your correspondence already. I know I've received that correspondence again only yesterday, and that work is in progress. It is nowhere in the public domain that we've ever said we weren't, or that we were terminating that contract. That contract naturally terminates at the end of that next year, and discussions are in place around how that goes forward. But it would be very inappropriate for us to comment on that at this point in time.
Well, I apologise if I've used your time inappropriately. You can put that down to my uncertainty about your own process. I just wanted to make the strength of feeling known about the importance of this contract.
Okay. Well, we've heard that message. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so we'll ask Councillor Longley to introduce item 7, please.
Thank you, Chair. Now, we're looking at the draft budget proposals here, so I'll wait whilst you get to the right pages. I've been told off earlier of going too fast on these. So, right, well, the first thing I've got to say is you've got to bear in mind that this budget is draft only and it's for consultation. So it's not an action budget, it's a consultation budget, which hopefully will turn into an action budget in February of next year, of course. Now, the second point I'd like to make is that it's has been submitted to everybody 1 month early this year, which is a great credit to the crew that's put this together. And this is at the request of the scrutiny, so they've got longer to scrutinise and come up with any good ideas, comments, whatever, and I'm sure, I've no doubt that that's what will happen. So, good. So we welcome that very much. So what I'll just point out a couple of highlights for you, and if you look on page 13, there's a small table there, you'll see. Anybody got that? The significance of that that I wanted to point out was that in this financial year, the gross spend, which is the figure at the bottom of the table, is 617 million, 617.8. Next year, the plan is to spend 648. That's £30 million additional spending on this year. And that's a very, very significant number. And anybody that does a quick calculation, see that's in excess of 5%. Then move on to page 24, which gives a bit more detail. I'm not going to run through it. You can all read it yourselves quite adequately, I'm sure. The one point that does come out of this is that, again, it's the 30 million's additional. There are pressures. There's inflation. Inflation's been put in at 2.87%, which is quite high, I think. And there are additional pressures, and there needs to be some productivity savings to counter that, plus the extra 30 million. So we think we're hopefully in good order there. Turn you on to the final summary, which you can study at your leisure, which is page 43. And the significant points there, but ones I've just mentioned, but also you'll see that there's this about halfway down, a third of the way down, there's a dedicated school grant. That's going from 600 this year to 634 next year. So all in all, quite substantial increases. And at this stage in the consultation, Chair, that was all I had in mind to say.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Longley. I've got a list of a number of speakers. So the first one's Councillor Scrimshaw.
Thank you, Chair. Again, speaking on behalf of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Obviously, it's far too early for scrutiny to be able to pass any judgment or comment on next year's proposed budget. Other than that, on paper, it does seem to be much better than previous years. We note the comments that we've received that the process of putting the budget together has been a much more robust process than previously. But I'm sure you'll understand we've heard similar comments in the past, and we will not simply be taking your word for that. We intend to drill down into the detail to assure ourselves that is in fact the case. Next year's budget appears to me to have two main strands. Firstly, the savings proposals, which we need to assure ourselves are genuinely realistic and can be delivered without an adverse effect on our residents, but also some of the wider financial assumptions. There are huge figures in the budget that allow for things like inflation, demographic pressures, the forecasting of future demand, along with the baselining figures, which in effect are there to try and sort of correct the position that the Council has found itself during the current financial year. If any of those assumptions are found not to be robust enough, there could potentially be serious financial implications for next year. So again, we'll be seeking to gain a greater understanding of how these projections have been made, and to that end, Scrutiny will be holding a series of working group challenge sessions before reporting any conclusions. These sessions will be open to all non-executive councillors, and I'd like to take this opportunity, if I may, to invite councillors from all political parties to take an active part in that work. And to kick this off, Scrutiny will be holding a special session this Thursday morning, 10 o'clock in room 15, for any non-executive councillor to come along with their suggestions as to which particular part of the budget they feel Scrutiny should be looking at in more detail. Hopefully this will help inform our priorities and make sure that the work we undertake between now and February reflects far more than just the views of the committee members themselves. And I look forward, therefore, to seeing as many councillors there on Thursday as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Stamborough.
Thank you very much, Chair. So, looking at the table on page 24, which is a paragraph 11.1 budget summary, which projects forward 1 year and shows a zero remaining savings requirement for 2021. Wouldn't expect to see any other figure at the bottom of that column than that. When we had the MTFP update as recently as August of this year, the Council then projected forward into 21-22 and 22-23, but we're no longer doing that. And you might say, well, that's because we won't exist after then, so there's no need to. Nevertheless, we did feel the need to do that up until very recently. I'm just wondering whether there are any figures available that you, Leader, or anyone else is prepared to comment on as to whether we have internal projections showing that in 21-22 and 22-23, given what we know, there is a savings requirement, a savings gap, or whether indeed we also have a zero remaining savings requirement for those 2 years now. Clearly a zero would be good because it would pass on the best possible situation to the new unitary authorities, and it would obviously give many people great comfort to hear that that's the case. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Didn't want to say a great deal on this subject. We'll cover it very effectively at the council meeting, I would have thought. But I would like to place on record thanks for putting it forward a month earlier than normal. It does give us a bit more time to look at it. We in the Labour group will, of course, be attending the scrutiny meetings and will give our input to those scrutiny meetings and look into a number of things in depth. And the areas we are particularly concerned about are the children's and adults services, and that's an area we will be concentrating on. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Michael Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What a difference a year can make. Looking back a year, I think this council was 64 million overspent, and looking through both barrels of a gun, you managed to balance the budget last year and the last 2 years. We are currently 2 million, I think, overspent, and I think based on last year's experience, there's every reason why the budget should be balanced this year. So, Mr. Chairman, looking at the budget for 2021, it's like a patient that's been in intensive care. It's come out of intensive care, and I think that coincided with the time that I actually left the Cabinet. I don't know whether there's any coincidence, but since that time, we've been on a steady recovery trajectory. The word fragile is used a great deal about the finances of the County Council. I think that's true. But looking ahead and looking at this budget, the words I would use after the first overview are solid, robust, and to some extent stress tested. And as Councillor Scrimshaw said, the rest of the stress testing will take place in scrutiny. But I think it's a reflection on Councillor Longley's work as Cabinet member and the rest of the financial team. This budget looks robust on the face of it. But we're in Act 1, Scene 1. I would record a certain reservation about one aspect of it, and that is the rather mean budget for police. This is always the Cinderella sector of the County Council's expenditure, and I don't think it's good enough to have increased that budget by as little as has been. If you look at page 21 of your budget pack, you will see there is a graph which shows clearly how Northamptonshire County Council is one of the lowest spenders on highways. I think we rank as 25th out of 26. Contrast that with the amount of money that we deploy for children's services. We're number 4. So, Mr. Chairman, there's some good and there's some bad. Please accept this as a challenge. Go away and in Act 5, Scene 4, come back to us, please, with some further proposals as to how you can increase the highways budget. That is the most important budget to most of the people who we respond to at parish council meetings and on the doorstep, and work needs to be done. I leave you with that challenge.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Councillor Morris, did you want to add any comments on behalf of adults?
Well, I mean, only to say that the good work continues in adults, and obviously for period 6 we are underspent, which is great. But looking forward to the budget that we're looking forward to, the new budget for 2021, it's good to see that we've managed to get some money in from government via the rates retention pilot and various other routes that have allowed us to increase our budget for next year. It is worth pointing out, as I think Councillor Longley did, that in fact our budgets are generally increasing in that year. They're not decreasing. We are spending more. We're perhaps spending it better than perhaps we have done in the past, but we are definitely spending more in each area, and that would include adults. So that would be my reflection on the paper there. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Smithers.
Yeah, I just have some more generic points to sort of make about the draft budget, really. To be honest, this budget will most probably be the final budget that this authority sets. More significantly, though, it paves the way to the establishment of the 2 new unitary authorities in Northamptonshire, giving them the best possible start. This draft budget also demonstrates the grit and determination of the administration, the commissioners and the chief executive and all the staff and directors who have had to wrestle, quite frankly, with the most complicated of issues to stabilise this ship. It's worth noting that there's still a sizable amount of savings to be found and targets to achieve, which will work towards to accomplish a clever usage of resources and services as we further continue the stabilisation of Northamptonshire County Council. but let's not get carried away. There's still a hell of a lot of work to do, and there's some enormous challenges.
Thank you, Councillor Smithers. I'd just like to add, I said quite a bit about the draft budget last week with all the media interest, but just to reiterate the points, especially around the 4% increase for staff, that's a big part of it as far as I'm concerned, to reward the staff for seeing us through to where we are now and to that run into unitary, as Councillor Smithers has just talked about. I think it's really important we do acknowledge staff with a decent pay rise. Also, those points around the commitment I made when I became leader and we made as an administration, that challenge to do everything within our power to deal with the financial situations and deal with the services. We know where the challenges are, especially in children's services, but I think this budget goes a long way in terms of honouring that commitment. We're looking at putting a bigger contingency in next year. We're looking to increase the amount going into reserves, and that is a good, prudent measure, as well as looking to, keep investing in the services, make them more efficient. And the challenge from Councillor Clark there is a very valid one, and we'll have to look and see what we can do about that. But I just want to put on record the thanks. I know how hard the officer team have worked on this, going back a number of months now, as well as doing the day job of delivering this year's budget, which continues to be challenging. So I just want to put on record the thanks to the Chief Exec and the officer team for all the leadership they've shown, and also to the staff for getting us to where we are now. We're not out of the woods yet, but we are stabilising. Things are looking better in terms of the services, and we want to leave this organisation, when we close the door, providing unitary does happen, of course, in the best possible shape, and we are all totally dedicated and committed to that end. So I'll leave my comments there. Back to Councillor Longley, if there's anything you'd like to add.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just run down one or two of the points that are made, and I'll start off with the scrutiny comments from Mick. Yeah, well, we very much welcome the scrutiny approach to drill down and drill away scrutiny, is what to say, because that's precisely what we want to deliver this budget, very badly want to deliver it, and we haven't got the monopoly on good ideas or thoughts or things like that. A lot of assumptions in there. We think they're right, but we're looking for opinions on that. So we've got a good relationship for everybody else in the room with scrutiny. They're a good crew, and we welcome all your input. Thank you for that. Projections beyond 2021, Chris. Well, we've got some thoughts, of course, and we did, once upon a time, we put a 4-year, but I really comment with that 1 year at a time. We haven't finished this financial year yet, and we're talking about next, and by all means, we're happy to talk to you about it, but, we've got a bit to do this year as well, still. Children's, working on Bob's comment here. If you go back to the graph that Mike drew our attention to on page 21, you'll still see that we're the 4th most expensive in the UK. Now, the significance of that is that that's the 4th based upon this budget, not what the actual number is at the moment. So that's worth remembering as the year goes by. We'll see where we end up. Providing children stays on budget, it'll be in this year, I'm talking about this next financial year, it'll remain the 4th. But so it's not. So we're not cutting corners there. In fact, they've got more in this year. I'll turn to Mike Clark's comments. Mike, flattery will get you anywhere. We all know that. So, but this budget is the credit to the officers who put it together. They're a good crew, and we fully intend to deliver it. Looking at the highways budget. Fair point, and that will no doubt come out in scrutiny as well. I mean, this is what this budget's all about. We've got 3 or 4 months to finalise it, so let's look in every corner. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Longley, and I welcome the scrutiny process and will encourage all members to get involved. And if there's ever a challenge to scrutiny now, it should be get stuck into this and do the best job you possibly can, because it is likely to be the last budget of the authority. So. On that note, Cabinet, are we happy to agree the report?
Yes.
Thank you. So, item 8, the Revenue Monitoring Report. Councillor Longley.
Right, well, in the here and now. Well, if you turn to, the easiest one to go is to turn to page 14. Are we all on the right page here? Anybody? You, Councillor Morris, we keeping up today? Yeah, thank you. Right, there's not a lot more to be said here. This is a continuum, as we all know. The important numbers on there are in the Children First Northampton, the 7.510. Everybody got that? Now, the significance of that is that the previous month, that's an overspend of 7.5. It's the projection. These are projections, not actuals. That's the projection at the year end. It'll be 7.5 overspend. At the end of period 5, it was projected 7.6. Now, that is the first signs of a stabilisation. Very, very good sign to see that. However, all of the modifications that took place we didn't recognise because we've yet to see that stabilise over a period. One swallow doesn't make a summer, but it's good news, not bad news, which meant that the bottom line there is the 2.230. That's the current projection for the year-end overspend. And as I say, 2.230 measured against over 600 million is a relatively small number. So a bit more promising. And if children stay stabilised, that would be very promising. However, we also have to bear in mind that the winter's on its way. Anybody who walked out this morning will know that. It's getting chilly. And so if we get a very severe winter, it'll be bad news. If we get a very mild winter, it'll be good news. So we'll see. None of us can do anything about that. So that's the latest, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. You've got Councillor Scrimshaw.
Thank you again, Chair. My last time, I promise. Scrutiny members met informally the other day following the publication of this report, just to sort of enable us to consider our collective view on the latest financial position, and for me to share that view with you today. The first thing to mention is that we welcome the latest position. A £2 million forecast overspend is clearly still a concern, but this is a much improved figure, and whilst this obviously doesn't allow us to actually predict the year-end position, we are pleased that things are continuing to be heading in the right direction, and further note the suggestion in 4.1 that other improvements may be possible, but also welcome the fact that those are not being included yet in the official figures until such time that they can be guaranteed. This sort of prudent approach is to be encouraged. We also note that the large overspend in children's appears not to be worsening, as has been alluded to, and we hope that this is a sign that the financial position in that service is at last stabilising, but recognise and hope Cabinet agree that it's still too early to become overly confident. With regards to children's, we also welcome the emphasis given in 7.2 about staffing and recruitment still being the biggest challenge. Scrutiny has consistently seen this and the organisational culture that it represents as having the biggest effect on the budget position, and we assume comments in 7.3 refer at least in part to the new HR manager, and would appreciate more details from Cabinet of exactly how they do intend to improve staff recruitment and retention in that area. As I mentioned earlier in the meeting, we welcome the overall budget position in adults, and would still, however, like to stress that there are some risks in that sector, and further welcome the specific demand that may be caused by winter is being pointed out to Cabinet in 9.2, and would also like to comment on the one-off mitigations mentioned in 9.5 being used to deal with pressures in the care budget.
It's £10, Dennis.
This will obviously have implications for next year's budget, but again, it's too early for scrutiny to make any final judgments on that. With regards to the Police Directorate, we note that many of the financial pressures reported in section 10 were things we highlighted as part of our comments during the budget setting earlier this year, and while we take no pleasure in being proven right, we hope that lessons may be learnt from that regarding any future comments that we have about savings proposals in the 2021 budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Stamborough.
Thank you very much, Chair. I was particularly pleased to read recommendation 3 on your report today, especially the final sentence that, when referring to the current year, as Malcolm rightly pointed out, the possibility of a pay award will be kept under review. I think that's good, I think that's right, and I'm glad to read that you are still looking at least the possibility of a pay award for staff in the current year. I think it would be a shame if the intention was anything other than to approach that with the seriousness it deserves, and I would hope that you would agree with me on that one, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Birch? No, okay, thank you. Okay, thank you. So, colleagues, any comments? Councillor Baker?
Just to reply to Councillor Scrimshaw's comment on the HR situation, we have currently just recently launched a big recruitment campaign once again, which will be ongoing all the time now. But we currently have 9 people coming in for interviews. So we are very heartened by this. These are full-time posts for NCC. But this will now be going on all of the time. We will be recruiting. Our social media pages will be full of adverts all the time. And I do actually ask, as I have done before in council, that if you see any of these advertisements and you are on social media yourself, that you do share them between all of your friends and family that you have on social media, including our foster carer advertisements when they come out. So that would be a big help. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Baker. Are there any further comments you'd like to add regarding children's? No? Okay. Councillor Smithers?
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, just for an overview of the Place Directorate and the work that they're doing to improve on this situation for the overall picture, should I say, is 0.3 million improvement in the overall position to give a net forecast underspend of 2.6 million. Major contributor to the overall position is the over-delivery on the home-to-school transport saving of 300,000, with savings of 829,000 forecast to be achieved. I'm going to add, this is not due to a policy change, but to be a concerted effort into the review of the application of existing policies and the optimisation of routes. Where there has been some delay in delivery of the 2019-20 savings, largely due to external factors, managers across the Directorate have worked proactively to deliver mitigations and take every opportunity to review the need for expenditure, such as, opportunities to review the need for processes, disputes resolutions and risk management. There's also a strong contract management which has been delivered performance deductions both in waste and on the school's PFI scheme. A significant part of the underspend arises also in the difficulty in recruiting to sort of vacant posts within the Directorate, some of which have not been filled since the completion of last year's restructure. This is impacting upon the capacity across the Directorate, but not to the detriment of the budgetary delivery.
Thank you. Councillor Morris, did you want to add anything?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I just was referring to period 6 and our over 2 million underspend, which is quite an achievement given the pressures that the service is under. There was some discussion around winter. Well, we have built in a certain amount of resilience for winter for 1920. Obviously, if we had a very harsh winter, that might well change that position, but we have built in quite some headroom for winter in there. So hopefully we won't have a harsh winter, but if we do, we will have to manage that within budget as we do in every directorate, and I'm sure we will do that. I mean, the management team, particularly in adults, but certainly because I work with Anna all the time, are exceptional and have worked really, really hard to deliver this underspend. And as we've said before, adults in the past has not always been renowned for its underspends, and it's largely due to the leadership of Anna and her management team that has been brought back under control. So that would be my comment, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Naden-Hawley, did you want to add anything?
I just want to say really that it's all because we've set the challenge to the Chief Executive Officer and to the officers to come in on budget, and I think they've done an absolutely sterling job. And in my particular portfolio, I've come in under budget. I have a very small budget, but the new Corporate Services Directorate has been created with an additional Assistant Director responsibility. This reorganisation has allowed other directorates to focus on their core business activity, and that is what we call business as usual slow and doing the boring well. And it's about shaping the two new unitary councils when they come on board, so that they do come on board in the best possible shape. And I think that's clearly what we have to do. And this budget shows that that is indeed what we are doing. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I'll just add, I really welcome, as the comments have already been made, the stabilisation of the children's budget. That's had the biggest impact on our period monitoring reports as we've run through the year, and it's good to see that that is starting to stabilise, and we've got to keep the focus, keep the work on to make sure we try and bring that budget in, or at least work within the parameters that where we are with it now, so it doesn't continue to overspend. And I know what a difficult challenge that is, because Cabinet, through Councillor Baker, we have spent hours and hours and a lot of time talking about the challenge that the organisation is facing, and the points are very valid around the challenge that has been put to the Chief Exec and officers to deal with that, and we're starting to see that, I won't say bear fruit, but get that grip, get that control to make sure that the budget is delivered this year, and we are, as I said in the previous item, very determined, very motivated to do that. So on that point, is there anything else you'd like to add, Councillor Longley?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Well, I'll just comment back from Mike's comments, and I think that was well summarised. We do have a good relationship with scrutiny, and I think that the scrutiny team are as dedicated to making this work as we are, as it's a team game. So I thank those comments. I think they were well considered. Coming to Chris's review, on the wage item, review is precisely what it says. It's a review, and we're constantly reviewing it. We've had excellent news for the staff on the 4% in next year's. We can afford to do that, but bear in mind where we've come from and where we're going. We still have £2.25 million. Now, the trouble with these budgets is that you start talking in numbers of 2 and 3. It doesn't sound very much, but it's £2.25 million we've still got to find. That's a lot of money in my book. And we've only done halfway through the year. So we've got a long way to go yet. So let's not, count our chickens before we actually got them. There's going to be some storms along the way, literally, and also we don't know what we're going to find. We're going to find some other things, no doubt. Hopefully not too many. But the year-end outlook really depends on two majors, as far as I can see. And that's the maintenance of the stabilisation of the children's budget. If we can keep that stabilised or improved, ideally, then that's one major item. If it gets out of control again, then that's different. And, of course, the severity of the winter, one which we can't do anything about. But other than that, I think, well, you've seen where we are. I think it's, given the situation, not a bad position. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Cabinet, do we agree with the report?
Yeah.
Thank you. Item 9, the monthly capital report. Councillor Longley again. Take your time.
Thank you, Fiona. It's a bit of a joke. These characters couldn't find the right page when I was going through it earlier on, so bear with it. Right,
carry on, Mel.
This is the capital. Now, there are two significant figures that come out of here. First is the item 1, which is the capital expenditure of this is the prediction for the year end of 81 million. Now, those that have been following this over the months will notice that that's been creeping downwards. Because for the last 18 months we've had a very severe grip on capital for obvious reasons. Anything capital affects the revenue account, borrowings and things of that nature. So it's been quite strict, been very strict. So the 81 million is the outlook, but if you turn to page 44 and you look at a chart there, 6.3, and it's down in the bottom right-hand corner. It's 19.767, and you'll notice there that's the year-to-date spend. So that's the half-year spend is about 20 million, and the year-end outlook is 80. So you would look at that and say, well, looks like the 80 million is a fairly safe bet. Understatement. And that really, Chair, is all I really wanted to bring to the Cabinet today on this subject.
Okay, we've not got We don't have any speakers. Councillor
I wanted to say something.
Bowen, yes.
Yes, I wanted to say
Don't worry, I wasn't forgetting you.
Yeah, I just had a question for Ian in terms of investment in adults, because that's part of our strategy in terms of developing care homes and elder care support in the county, rather than having people having to go, particularly in elder life, away from the county, and it needs to be near their own home. So can you give me an update?
Yes, thank you. Through you, Chair. Well, there's two particular schemes that are mentioned here in the capital report, so I'll start with those. There are probably others which I will come back to you on, but there's two certainly in here. And this is part of our new thinking, Invest to Save, which is obviously to try and control the market as best we can within the social care sector. These are baby steps, and there's a lot more to be done, I would imagine, in that area, but these indicate where we are hoping to go. So if you...
Can I just interrupt you? These are the ones in the report.
Yes.
Yeah. Do you have the information on the extra that are planned in the future at this moment in time?
I don't have them to hand at the moment. I'll have to come back to you on that.
I think we'd all be quite keen to
Yeah,
to
we
have
will
that
come back to you on that.
Okay.
But if I could just refer to the ones that are in here, if that's all right, Chair. Yes? Okay. So if you look at page 48, number 4, Beach Close, that's obviously, it's quite a small capital sum, but it's part of this idea of trying to control the marketplace, which will help us to control the cost of packages. And then also, if you look at page 46, there has Moray Lodge redevelopment, which is going to be quite significant, although that has now come out of the capital programme because it's now going to be delivered by an external partner. But the principles are the same, and that will deliver some much needed care that we can control within the county. So I will come back to you on a further update of other buildings we're working on, etc. But I haven't got that to hand at the moment. Thank you, Chair.
Maybe we could bring it to Cabinet next time.
Yes, we will do that. We'll definitely do that. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Longley, anything to add?
Nothing more to add, Chair.
Thank you. Cabinet, do we agree the reports? Thank you. So item 10, the Treasury Management Report, Quarter 2, 2019-20. Last one, Councillor Longley.
Almost, Chair, thank you. 3 points I'd like to bring out on this report, those that you have in front of you. The first is probably the most significant, is that the year-end borrowing is anticipated to end up at 580 million. And that's although it's higher at the moment, that's a cash flow argument. But the year-end outlook looks like 580, which is is consistently in tune with our control over capital expenditure, which runs to borrowings. Borrowings have an impact on the revenue line. So that's an important point. The second one, which is you can find, if I can find it later on, is you're all familiar with Lobo loans? Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. Well, those that are, it's item 7.2, and we've knocked another 10 million off the Lobo loans. They were, from my recollection, a year or so ago, 150 million. That takes them down to 110. And of course, at every opportunity, we will continue to knock them on the head. But that's going in the right direction. And finally, if you look to 7.3, that outlines the change of borrowing that took place during the period, and effectively we borrowed about 100 million at what we think are very low rates. Now, we were borrowing this money on short-term money, one-year money, at on average about 1.1%, and this offer came up from the Public Works Loan Board at 1.68. Now, on the face of it, that would sound a daft idea to do that, but we're not in this for the short term, we're in it for the long term, and it was the borrowing of between 40 and 50 years. So there won't be too many in this room who'd be around when that finishes. So, you know, that's a very, very long-term commitment, and at very, very low rates, because they're not going to stay that low forever, are they? We don't think. And then we had another 10 million over 6.5 years at a 1.12. Well, that's pretty much par for what we already had. Now, on the face of it, that looked like we were going to take a hit this financial year, and I think I reported back that I expected a £200,000 hit this year. And that was a judgment we made. I stand by that. I thought that was a good thing to do, still do it again if it could. However, fortune smiled on us, oddly enough, and the Public Works Loan Board put the interest rates up by 1%. Now, that was luck. I've got to confess, that was luck. But it means that in fact we're better off than we would otherwise been, and it'll save us £1 million in next year's budget. So those are the three highlights, and that, Chair, is my report on that, I think.
Thank you. Councillor Stone.
Thank you, Chair. I'm glad I've been called because I didn't quite understand that last point. So if you could elaborate on that, I would be very, very grateful. I happened to be at a finance conference the week the increase in interest rates for the Public Works loan board loans were announced. And I have to say, all the local authorities and all the officers and councillors in the room were a bit dismayed. So I would quite like to have a bit more information about how that's going to impact on us, particularly with our present borrowing. I understand it's not going to affect historic borrowing, but we must have borrowing in the pipeline, and how it's going to impact on our forward plans, because presumably any future borrowing means we're going to have to revise our business planning to take account of that, and also to take account not just on borrowing and our returns, but on the impact it's going to have on our revenue budget. So I'd like a bit more information about that. In terms of municipal bonds, we've talked about that a long time ago now when it first was set up. And my understanding was that we invested £100,000 into that, but in the papers it says it's 200,000. So I'm wondering if the figure in the papers is the historic figure, or whether we've taken out an additional investment in the municipal bonds, and whether, because of the new situation we're in, we were half expecting this time last year for the municipal bonds to go to the wall, weren't we? It seems to have been revitalised, and I understand the first loans are being issued, or a call for loans are being issued. So I'm just wondering if any further contributions are being required from local authorities, and if there is a requirement, whether we're going to make a contribution. And I just wondered what your evaluation is about the robustness of that scheme. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Longley.
Yeah, sure. Right, well, let's start about the Public Works Loan Board. What happened was, sorry, was that somebody? So what happened?
That's £20, Dennis. It'll be 50 next.
Yeah.
It wasn't my fault, actually.
No, sure. No, I was like, yeah, right. Well, the Public Works Loan Board, that the increase of 1% was completely out of the blue, and that's why everybody be pretty fed up, because great credit to our Treasury people here. They spotted that window, dived in, made the recommendation, and we grabbed it with both hands. You may recall at the last cabinet meeting, I said that if I could have 200, I'd have done 200. You know, there's only so much we could have done. And although that would have, at that point in time, demonstrated a loss of roughly 0.5%, 1.1 to 1.6, say, not for the full year, but over a full year, then we thought with 40 to 50-year borrowing, I mean, what's the interest rates going to be like in 2029? No idea. But we know there'll be 1.68 on that 100 million. 2039, 2049, we know it'll be 1.6. Imagine that for the future people, that they've got stability at that level. Now, I personally expected interest rates to go down short term, Brexit and all the rest of it, and who knows. So it was a long-term decision, albeit with a hit in the short term, we thought. Imagine our surprise, therefore, when the following week they went up by 1 point. And I think the reason they went up 1 point, I don't know this, but I think they did, was I think the demand was so great that they put the brakes on. And anybody that hadn't taken out those loans, all of a sudden, overnight, was stuffed with a 1% increase. We were not. Lucky all us. Okay. Municipal bonds. The other thing is that when we do these plans, if you look on that report, you'll see there's a forecast of where interest rates are going. Now, that's all it is. But you know, you might have a different opinion, but that's the forecast. So you tend to work on forecasts of that nature. You don't just, you know, you don't just hope. You try and forecast it. Municipal bonds. I'm not sure what the current status is. My personal understanding is that we've assumed we get nothing. Anything we get is a bonus, as I believe. So if it comes good, excellent. If it doesn't come good, well, too bad, you know. And if there was a request for more contributions, then I would certainly resist that. Is that okay? Thanks. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, Cabinet, do we agree with the report?
Yeah.
Thank you. So next one is item 11, the annual report from the Northamptonshire Improvement Board. It's got my name against it. Okay, so we will all recall we set up the Improvement Board about a year ago. We've had 6 meetings. This is the Chair's annual report. It will be going to Council next week, where I'm sure it will give it a bit more airtime and take some questions. The Chair will be able to take some questions. I think the Board has served the Council well. It was set up to show and offer transparency to our partners around all the finances and the services. Of course, as the road to unitaries develops, it talks about the Board's aim, the improving Council's financial position, testing the soundness and resilience of the Council services and the local government reorganisation. So it covers there's quite a broad remit, and it's been well attended. We've had some good peers and representatives from the likes of Essex County Council, some London boroughs, some independent members from the Local Government Association, and I think the Board has done a good job. Obviously, we all know we report to Cabinet very regularly. We've got the unitary work going on. We've got the Leaders Oversight Board. So the work of the Council is out there all the time, and we've got to look at what the need of the Board is as we move forward. And I think we need to keep it in place in the short term to make sure that we are demonstrating what we said we would actually do. But I'm happy to present the report to Cabinet this afternoon. I think we can give it a bit more of an airing at Council next week, and I'm happy to take any comments. And I notice there's a speaker, Councillor McGee.
Thank you, Chair. I'll speak now, given that we'll be concentrating on the budget next week, hopefully at full council. I've got some real concerns and maybe some questions, Chair, if you want to answer this as leader of the administration. The Improvement Board, and if you look at their aim and their key objectives, what have they actually achieved that none of the other the committees in this council have achieved? Have we look at audits? Have we look at scrutiny? Can someone tell me what's actually been achieved? I'm not having a go at the Chair or any members, and there's quite a few members, which begs the question, how much has this committee took to run for the full year, and what have we gained from it? If we look at number 4 on page 82, when it talks about one of their key objectives is to work with partners, what I would have expected from that is some recommendations to this council where we can have some further joint commissioning, further joint working, because unless we move forward with joint commissioning from CCGs to public health, from social care and other partners, we will be in trouble in the future too. I can't see in this paper, and I did speak to the Chair before, where is the actual outcomes after that year of 6 meetings? And it begs the question, Chair, you're going to cut that down. Well, the recommendation is to 3. I believe it's going to be 4 meetings. Does that mean you've recognised too that it's just a talking shop? Or do you actually recognise that it's doing something? But because actually, if you look at the list on there in Appendix 2, the list of people that's on that board, well, there's some expertise in that board, isn't there? There's some fantastic expertise in that board, and we haven't took advantage of that in the last year, because I don't see anywhere within this council or any papers that I've seen where we've took advantage of that. Everything else that you've talked about has been done outside of the Improvement Board, i.e. through audit, through scrutiny and other areas. So, Chair, maybe you can answer and tell me how much it's cost to run this and what actual outcomes was achieved and recommendations that you've actually took up from the board. I do recognise one, Chair, and they did have a heavy push on supporting our staff. And I'd take to say that you have given it lip service, having an auditorium speech to staff once a month. It's not listening to staff, that's talking to staff. But if you can correct me and say how you've listened to staff and what difference that will make, I'm happy to apologise. But I'd like to see the difference that this group has made.
Okay, well, first of all, I'm going to pick up on the last item. I think you ought to apologise, Councillor McGee. The Chief Exec and I actually have monthly surgeries with staff, and we do talk, sit down and listen and actually act on some of the things that staff come up with, all of them. And if I know one person in this room that will act when they're given an instruction or an action plan, it's the Chief Exec, and we keep a log of everything that's talked about, and they're really good sessions, and it's a shame we can't share them with other members, because we get a very candid reflection of some of their issues. Some of them are very minor, some of them are, you know, how their service operates or what we could do better to collect money on things like parking tickets or blue badges and stuff like that. So I put it back to you that we do actually talk and listen to staff, and we do that very regularly. And I'm sure we've got one on. I don't have to look in my diary. We have them very, very regularly every single month, and they're always full, and they're good, very good sessions. Back to the paper. The cost of the improvement board is met by the LGA, so we've thanked them for that and the support. It's administered by them. Your opening challenge, as in terms of what it has achieved, I think is actually a very reasonable challenge to us. I think we've come to a point now where the board has been running. I think it was the right thing to have in place, and if I hadn't have asked for it to be put in place, I think it would have been put in place by the LGA or through the commissioners. They'd have put something like it in place. But my view of it was, I don't think it was ever going to come and change a lot of how we're going about doing our work here as we continue and try to recover. The main point of it to me was about the transparency in demonstrating to those partners that they're all invited, they can participate, they can give us ideas outside of the other arenas and other meetings that all of the directors have, to show that we're doing everything within our powers, going back to the commitment I said earlier, to honour that point around doing everything in our powers to sort the place out and being as transparent as possible. So what has it achieved? And I think the answer to that is it's offered that transparency. And I think as we move forward, we do need to think about repurposing the board, and is it the right thing to have, given we've got lots of other forums in place, populated meetings by senior people from health, from police, from, you know, all of the people that this organisation touches. So I think that is a very valid challenge, and is one that we will be taking forward. But certainly the cost is met by the LGA, and about paying lip service in talking to staff, that is something I take quite personally, because we do that religiously every month. And if any staff are listening on the webcast or whatever, I would plead with them, come and see us if you've got an issue, and we'll do our best to sort it out. There we go.
So Dennis wanted to have a word, but you need to explain to him that he needs to speak on request and answer.
Well, Dennis, you were supposed to register through Chris, but as it's you, I'll let you off if you're very quick.
Just remind him that he must do it before 11 o'clock.
Yeah, and you're supposed to do it before 11 o'clock.
No, thanks, Matt, for letting me speak, and I understand, and I won't do it again. But I was talking about this improvement board. I was quite impressed, actually, because the chairman come and see myself and Chris, and we had and I was really pleased that we had quite an in-depth chat about things, what was happening within the improvement board, and he was taking on some of the suggestions that I put to him. I did say how important it was for backbench councillors to be involved in this, and I still believe it. I still believe that's the case, and I was just wondering, Leader, if that we could have with the improvement board some sort of forum where we can give you suggestions, because you don't. You know, you can't really know how backbench councillors are feeling. I mean, majority of people with backbench councillors wants this council to succeed. I know I do anyway, and I appreciate the efforts that have been done. So I just wanted you to know that we did give him lots of suggestions, lots of things, and I think this is the ideal way of going forward. That's why I wanted to speak, because it was quite important what I had to say, really. Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. Okay, any further comments, Cabinet? Cabinet, do we agree with the reports? Like I say, it goes to Council next week, so we can give it another going over then.
Yeah.
Okay, agreed. Thank you. So item 12 is the dedicated schools grant funding arrangements 2020-21. Councillor Baker is going to speak to this first, I believe. Well, you go first.
Okay.
And then Malcolm.
Thank you very much. This is a consultation process that we're just beginning. The schools grant has gone to the meeting of the schools forum, which was last week, and we will go back to them again in due course. So the main purpose of this report is to provide an update on the indicative dedicated schools grant, commonly known as the DSG, the announcements for Northamptonshire, and seek delegated to the portfolio holder, Director of Children's Services and the S151 officer to finalise the school funding formula and the early years single funding formula to meet government deadline, as well as the high needs funding arrangements. So the key points for this are that the report provides some background into how the DSG is structured into 4 blocks: schools, central schools, and services, high needs and early years, and what each of these blocks covers. In July, the Department of Education made announcements that it was to increase school funding and high needs funding, with a smaller increase in high needs. Nationally for 2021, these increases were 2.6 billion for schools, that's maintained academy, primary and secondary schools, 0.7 billion for high needs pupils, and 66 million for early years. In October, indicative allocations were released. If the indicative allocations remain, this is a positive settlement for the Northamptonshire schools. Northamptonshire's share of the national increases are 30.7 million for schools, 10.5 million for high needs pupils, and for early years, confirmation that 2-year-old funding rate and 3 to 4-year-old funding rate will both increase by 8p per hour. And the early years maintained nursery school supplement will continue for a further year at least. Note, this announcement on the early years has been made since the Cabinet report was originally drafted, so this is not in your papers already. Officers work very closely with the Northamptonshire Schools Forum in setting the funding formula, consulting with the forum to inform proposals. The Schools Forum met on the 24th of October, as I mentioned, and had some in-depth discussions on the indicative allocations and how this should be considered for 2021. Following Schools Forum, a consultation document has been released for all schools to comment on the proposals for 2021 funding formula, and the results of this consultation will be presented to the Schools Forum at the next meeting. The outcome of the meeting and any votes made will inform the setting for the final schools funding formula for 2021 for Northamptonshire schools. The consultation ends on the 22nd of November, and members are asked to encourage schools in their areas to respond. A consultation on early years single funding formula will also be undertaken to inform the settings of the EYSFF, so early years single funding formula I prefer myself. Delegated authority is being sought because the short time frames involved in when the government released the final funding allocations for 2021, and the work has to be undertaken on detailed financial modelling and the requirement to meet central government and statutory deadlines for the submission of the required returns to the Department of Education.
Thank you. So we'll go to Councillor Birch.
Thank you, Chair. My question and concern really is on the high needs funding for SEND places. welcome hugely the indicative increase that has been proposed, and also the transfer of the £2 million from the schools block. But we all know that along with the rest of the country, the demand for numbers of high needs in Northamptonshire is rising, both the expectations from local authorities and from parents. The current SEND challenges and pressures include a growing school population. The whole population is growing. The rise in pupils diagnosed with SEN. We have more pupils coming through with SEND cases. The limited special school places. There are children who do not have school places, and the pressure of the wider local authority budgets, of course. This also leads, as a rise in school exclusion rates, not only in the primary schools where they don't have the funding to support the children that don't receive the higher needs funding or do not have an educational healthcare plan, but the exclusion of those children as they move into secondary school as well, who don't have the places that they need for schools. As this moves forward, as the demand grows and the consultation is out, could we have some thoughts as to the projections within the county for this demand? This is a one-off at the moment, this extra £2 million. It's not necessarily there again, and as the demand is growing year on year, we're going to have to make provision for this increased level of demand upon the services and the numbers that are coming through. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Stanborough.
Thank you, Chair. So specifically, paragraph 3.21, early years funding arrangements, and reference is made to the levels of historical additional funding for maintained nursery schools and the DfE's intention to remove this funding in 2021. And the very stark assessment of the effect of that, which will potentially put maintained nursery schools in the position of being financially unviable. I wonder what contingency plans the County Council has in place for such an event.
Thank you. Councillor Scott, did you have another point? If you could make it very briefly, as you didn't, we haven't got you down.